Your money is made in the field by the labor force who are building your projects, and therefore it is essential that their physical and mental well-being is optimized. And that's what we're going to talk about today on this week's episode of Construction Genius. My guests are Vivian Burgnon and Sebastien de Ghellink. In collaboration with the Princeton University, they have created the Construction Wellbeing Initiative. Their company is Skill Signal. They're the founders of that company, and they've collaborated with Princeton University to create this initiative, which is aimed to collect, analyze, and compile field-tested well-being interventions into an online public repository to help increase the physical and mental well-being of construction workers on job sites. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I know you're going to find this conversation useful, very interesting, and provocative. Thank you for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Vivian, Sebastien, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having us, Eric. We're really excited to be here.
Hi, Eric.
It's a pleasure. I know that you guys have a particular passion and focus that is extremely important. It's the Construction Wellbeing Initiative. And so I'd just like to kick off right away, Vivian, by asking you, what is the Wellbeing Initiative?
Yeah, so over the summer, Sebastien and I were accepted into a fellowship program with Princeton University's Kahneman-Treisman Center for Behavioral Science and Public Policy. So what that means is that we are considered what they call associate practitioners in residence. And out of it, we started the Construction Wellbeing Initiative, or CWI for short. And through this initiative, we are really looking to understand the sources of mental health crisis that's really plaguing our industry, to compile industry experience and analyze field-tested solutions that will increase the physical and mental well-being of construction workers on job sites and around the nation. Our team plans to publish a comprehensive online repository of these interventions, which could be used as public resources available to anyone desiring to increase the physical and mental well-being of construction workers on their job sites and within their organizations.
Okay. As you've been diving into this, what are the sources of mental health issues in construction?
So, fatigue, opiates, despair, burnout, depression, loneliness, suicide is top, top seen rates of suicide in the industry. Substance abuse is very common with alcoholism. We have the opioid epidemic that does affect a lot of our workers. Just being in the fields and the day in, day out, and the heavy bodily impact it has for everybody that's building. So there's a list of grim health crisis effects on our workers, and we could go on about that one.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Sebastien. Go ahead.
It's really coming from, construction is notoriously a harsh industry, right? It's a lot of men, working with each other. It's probably one of the last industries where, screaming at each other, grown men screaming at each other is something that still happens. I worked for a long time in other industries, and that was probably a big no-no. So we all know that construction is a harsh place. It's a hard place, and so this is something that was always sort of latent. The toll that it takes on your body, the toll that it takes on your thinking. You may be away from your family for a long time, and building something, and being away from your loved ones. the alcoholism, the substance abuse in general is something that probably everyone has experienced at some point in their career with probably looking at situations on job sites, and really what happens is that the COVID crisis exacerbated all of this. The stress went through the roof. The problems of supply chain, the problems of not knowing what you were dealing with COVID. I mean, if you remember in March 2020 when this all started, we didn't know how COVID was being transmitted. Was it transmitted by touch? Was it transmitted only by those
Right.
droplets that everyone was talking about? So it was an extremely stressful situation, and so those sources of mental health breakdown, whether it's burning out or full depression to people really thinking to harm themselves, is something that has become much more talked about, I would say.
Okay. Um, so as you were going through that list, Vivian, you mentioned things like fatigue, loneliness, despair, and then you mentioned things like opioid abuse, substance abuse, alcoholism. So as a construction company owner, it seems like those two things would drop into different boxes, and let me explain to you why. Because I'm going to test my guys for drugs. Now I know there's some that I can't test, but I may be looking to remove some of those people from my company because I can't have them on my job site because of the safety issues and the that you can't work here if you're doing whatever that is, that X thing, But then there's that other bucket of stuff which can be related, of course, but it's also distinct in the sense that it's a human thing that people experience regardless of whether they're they're abusing substances as a result of that, perhaps. So how should a construction company approach that distinction in terms of how I just described it? With in certain cases, if you're doing this, you can't come to work here anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's got to be a top-down approach to start there. And I think a lot of it stems from just the sheer culture on the construction site. I think, we've built this culture, as Sebastien had said, it's very machismo. It's very, it's rough. And the workers are working like slaves. I mean, you're working 7 days a week, 10 to 16 hour shifts, to the bone, day in, day out, in harsh conditions. And that's just a part of the culture. That's just accepted that this is construction. This is what needs to get done. And that's part of it. And so for a long time, that's been ingrained in our population, and there's no changing it. And from a management's perspective, you're running your organization. You have deadlines, you have budget, you have you've got to meet that, and that's what they're looking at. They're looking at their bottom line. They just want to get the project going, and they want to wrap things up and get the project finished so that they can move on. So I think that what we're starting to see is, now that we're bringing more awareness about the fact that our people are really suffering, and if we don't have our people to continue these to build, then we're not going to have a project to begin with. We're not going to have any business. So what can we do as an organization to create a better environment for our people so that we can continue on with the work? How can we, whether it's tweaking hours, whether it's tweaking time off, whether it's just general humanistic needs on a project? Are we providing reasonable needs for them? Are they getting water? Are they getting suitable bathrooms? These are all types of things that we're starting to look at that were very much to this day, very much overlooked on a construction site. So, but it's taking a lot of noise. It's taking a lot of outcry from our people, to bring awareness to these issues, to just the general, humanistic issues.
Okay, so let's talk about that in a little more detail. Sebastien, if you want to speak to this, is what can an organization do in order to begin to address some of these mental well-being issues?
Yeah, and this was, and I want to talk about about an event that we held over the summer. So this was back in August. We had 50 construction professionals that joined us on site at Princeton University for a full day of conversations and workshops around that exact question. Like, what is your experience of the mental health crisis that we're going through in construction, and what do you think should be done? And looking at that event, it was so interesting, and I also want to add to that it was construction professionals that were coming from several functions. We had people from the field, superintendents, foremen. We had people from the insurance businesses. We had people from the office that are, project managers or project executives. We had people from the safety department, directors of safety. We had people from public policy. So it was an extremely interesting event because we had all of these different point of views really chiming in on that specific topic of the mental health crisis and of, what can we do? And I think it was so interesting to see that very quickly people came together on the dynamics of what's going on. What are the symptoms that we're seeing in the field, but also at the office? What's going on in the construction industry? And we had, a board full of notes that we're making during those discussions, and really going back again to those pressures, the way that people are sometimes broken by financial burdens. The typical construction situation is that if you work in construction, there is moments in your professional career where you're not getting paid because you're between two jobs. And depending on the economy, sometimes that period can be short or longer. So that financial instability is really something that lives in people. You also have when you're on a job, you have the stress of the logistics, the scheduling, the typical situation where everything on a construction job is temporary. So you can be in a completely disorganized environment where things are changing every single day. And, add to that the supply chain problems that we had. Add to that changes in design or changes in requirements. And you really can go into some very, very stressful situations at every single level, from superintendent down to, the individual trade worker who needs to execute the work. And then, and we started to touch upon that as well, but those personal pressure points, when you get on a construction site, it's not like you are now completely into your, you become a different person. You're a construction worker. No, you come to that job and you bring your family problems with you. If you have someone at home who is sick, someone at home who is unwell right now. I mean, all of these things are working on your mind while you're executing that, reasonably dangerous work of building. So really, it was so interesting to see how those symptoms and that dynamic that we're seeing across financial pressure, logistics pressures, personal pressures on anyone who is in construction. I think people really understand them and understand them even to a personal level, because most of the people had experience them themselves. And once we
can I ask you something about that real quick?
Sure, of course.
And I just keep coming back to this in my mind. Is it's kind of like one of these gangster films, right? Where you have this movie about the mob or something like that, and there's a scene in the movie where the guy's like, well, this is the life we've chosen and this is the way it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like, I'll give you another one. It's like sports. Think about like American football, for instance, which is it's basically gladiator, modern gladiators. And they do, incremental things to try and improve the players' safety. But the fact is, if you're going to play football, you are going to suffer a physical and mental toll as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So with construction, the financial aspect of it, with the uncertainty, especially for the labor pool, I understand that. The logistics, that's just part of the gig. I mean, what sometimes there's these things that are out of your control, and they're out of the control of the owner of the business. So as an owner of a construction company, where can I have the most impact in terms of beginning to address some of these well-being issues?
Yeah, and it's I think those two analogies that you made with with sports, I think that's right on. But you can see what happened in sport lately, and in football in particular, is that we started talking about concussions.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
That became something. And even if you look at something that may be also an analogy, which I was thinking about right now, is the armed forces, right?
Yes.
It's only like in the second Iraq war that we started looking at PTSD, right?
Right.
And before that, no one was talking about it. It doesn't mean that the problem was not there, but nobody was really addressing it. And then I think it's important to see that we're exactly at that moment in construction. We're starting to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is usually the first step, and it's an essential step, because once you start talking about those symptoms, once it's kind of getting to the minds of people and especially the decision makers, then usually solutions will start sprouting, right? And again, we started to talk about PTSD in the armed forces. We started talking about concussions in football. And look at what happened. There was an entire movement where an entire kind of redirection of energy around what can we do better? What can we do to help people that are suffering from those things? Even though recognizing that you can't really completely avoid them, right? And that's exactly the same again as in construction. You can't make a construction site risk-free. That doesn't exist. You're working with equipment that's inherently dangerous to people. So first, let's start talking about it, and we're exactly at that moment. And now, what we can see is that there is a start of a redirection of energy and resources. Again, so it's important that those decision makers are involved in that, because they need to make those decisions to redirect the resources, the time, the money, the focus of the companies and the organizations towards solving those problems, or at least addressing them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So going to your question, like what can you do? What can you do right now? Well, first and foremost, talk about it. And that was one thing, and if you talk about this subject, that's the one thing that everyone now is really getting to. It's that step of let's talk about it. Let's understand that this is it's part of our reality, right? So let's talk about it. And once you can start, once you start about it, I think it's for each organization, it might be slightly different, because some companies, maybe they're not struggling with the financial burdens because they have a very good, compensation program for their employees. Sure. So maybe that part is kind of taken care of. But maybe, where the problem is in the field, there is way too many design changes and too many rules, or not enough rules, and and it's, that uncertainty on the field. So so now let's start focusing on what's not going well right now, and let's see how we can potentially increase that and make it better. And then again, it's not a question of intensity. It's going to be a question of those small incremental steps. That's extremely important. So don't make it a 6 months toolbox talk or stand down or on your job talking about mental health, talking about stress, talking about what's going on in your life that may be having an impact on the safety on this job, but make it something that you talk about every single week. That's going to be very important. Intensity in this case is always less than repetition and than taking those small incremental steps on a regular basis. Does that make sense?
Sure. So Vivian, let me ask you then, as you were involved in that discussion with the 50 folks from the construction industry, what was the one thing that they said, or a couple of things that really surprised you that you hadn't thought of, and that you were like, whoa, that's interesting?
Yeah, so I think I have two sides to that spectrum. I think what's actually happening on the job site, or lack thereof. There were a few things that were pretty shocking. As I had mentioned earlier, the humanistic kind of expectations, drinkable water, bathrooms,
just the basics almost.
The basics. Yeah. So, I mean, that was pretty surprising to hear. And we know it's a construction site. There's a lot of logistical things that you have to navigate, that it's, you're building, especially core and shell, you're building something from the ground up. You don't have electricity, you don't have, running water, and you have to navigate that. You have to find a solution. But there were instances where, some contractors, it was, dead heat, and they didn't even want to take responsibility for providing water for their crews. And it was a cost. There was a cost associated with it. And that was really disheartening to hear. I think, and then on the flip side, I think were interventions. So there are companies out there that are already taking a lead in promoting well-being on the job sites. And they are implementing pilot programs for, weekly oil changes for their crews, haircuts. They're bringing barbers on site because they know that their schedules involve, 16-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week, and they don't have time to do their basically human needs. And so that was really heartening, and we were very happy to hear that this is making waves. There are organizations out there that are really looking at this and care about their people and want to pilot some of these programs to see the feedback and see if that moves the needle. So those were definitely a few things I think that we were surprised about, and we're continuously looking and exploring those interventions, is what we call them, on site. So that's one thing that we're doing with the Construction Wellbeing Initiative, is collecting information on interventions that are actively being piloted or deployed on job sites or within organizations. We're also looking for content. So if anybody has content to share, what they've seen, and this can be beyond. We know that the UK, they're about a year or two ahead of us in the States with their interventions and just the overall awareness of the mental health crisis in construction. And so they're doing a whole lot over there. I went to a conference, London Build, last year, and it was there were several roundtables and panelists that were discussing the well-being. And I think a lot of it came from the pandemic. The pandemic really served as a catalyst to promote, the overall conversation of, what's everybody's experience on some level, a mental health, crisis. And, what can we do about this? Talking about it, as Sebastien said, is really that first step. So now it's kind of about the interventions and the actionable actionable steps to change the, or move the needle.
Exactly.
So as you're having this discussion, then what is the biggest source of pushback that you get from the company owners and executives? Because again, sometimes when I hear what you guys are saying, but then I'm thinking about my job as a construction company owner is to bring the right people into the right positions.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that process is I'm looking to identify the guys and gals who maybe not be a fit because they don't have their shit together in their personal lives. Right. And so I'm not going to bring that guy into my business.
Yeah.
And I'm not responsible for that. So where's that pushback part from the construction company owners and executives?
Yeah. So interestingly, there is not a lot of pushback. I get your question.
No, please, yeah.
Recruiting is a very important. It's an essential function of a company. Getting the right people in the right function is essential. So obviously you have that as a responsibility as a business owner, and but at the same time, what we can see is that usually people don't make many mistakes during the hiring process. They especially experienced business owners, they kind of know how it works. They have their radars. They can sort of assess people pretty well. And it's usually kind of happening later. You go through those several projects, and someone that you hired 10 years ago and now has a little bit of lack of motivation because they've been doing the same thing for so long, and so maybe that's a conversation now about this star employee of yours that used to be so good. How can we maybe uptrain them so that motivation goes back higher? It's about sometimes just changing situations. We all have them, right? We all have personal situations that are changing. You start a job, it's going great, and then suddenly you have a personal circumstance that changes, and now your brain changes. And you're not as efficient anymore. And so I think when we're looking at those situations, we don't see essentially a lot of pushback necessarily, which is great. And I think this is something that Vivian and I love so much about construction, and both of us grew up in real estate and construction, and so we kind of we understand it pretty well. But in construction, there is this sense of family, right? I mean, there is so many of those companies are family owned or even employee owned. So yes, there is more than if you're working at Shell or Disney. You have that sense of belonging because you're actually part of the family, or you're part of the shareholders of the company. So that camaraderie is really stronger in construction to begin with, and is really something that can be used when it comes to motivating people, keeping people safe. I mean, it's amazing to see what people are sometimes ready to do for others than what they wouldn't do for them, right? When you have a friend who is hurting for some reason, who is going through a rough patch, there is so many people, that will go through everything to make that friend better, and they wouldn't necessarily do it for themselves. So it's that sense of belonging and connection in construction is certainly something that can be used when it comes to well-being and kind of getting people back up and getting people back to the right place.
Sure. Vivian, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I think I love what Sebastien said, but I think there also is a reality of the responsibility for who's going to own the well-being on the job site. Is it the owner that's going to be responsible for it? Is it the superintendent? Is it who's really going to own the I guess the leadership for that? And I think a lot of, I guess from our meeting back in Princeton, there was a lot of comments on it's always about the money. It's always about, we don't
Yep.
have the money to take on these interventions. We don't have the budget to fit in time off or sick days for our crews. We don't have the time. We don't have the money. And that, I think, is a real reality within our industry. Yes. And so,
well, let me give you an example. So I'm out in California, right? So it hasn't rained in California for like 3 years, basically.
Yeah.
And so, I got customers, my clients who are dirt movers, right? Mm-hmm. And they've been kicking butt and building projects for 3 years in a row with no winter break, so the winter is when the guys kind of take off and, but the reality is the projects are there to be built. And, so I'm in this catch-22. My guys want to work. I want to build. There's no rain. There's no break. And I know that really increases the stress level. What am I supposed to do in that situation?
Yeah. I think that's what we need to figure out. I think that, we're really looking at these alternative interventions and to see what kind of putting everything together and seeing what we can kind of do, especially when we have circumstances that are out of our control. I mean, those are circumstances that are really, you can't change the weather. So I think that's, what we're trying to establish is kind of a standard of different types of interventions that involve low to medium to high involvement. And also, resources, monetary resources. And, you can do things, as minimal as, handing out stickers or, going to lunch, bringing your crew out to lunch and treating them to lunch once a week or twice a month. Or, really looking at, larger, I guess, more costly interventions such as bringing biometric health screening, a company on board to do health screenings for your crew to establish that just that level of care. Obviously that takes more resources and more involvement, but that's what we're trying to look at. We're trying to see and to establish, I think, a set of standards and even just a set of options for companies depending on their size, their, what they can contribute to the well-being of their crews. And so that's certainly an ongoing process for us.
Yeah. And again, those small incremental steps or those small steps that you're taking are, again, much more important than, getting them, 1 week to Disney World, right? So we're not talking about that. It could be, it's around, diet and nutrition, but it's also recognizing that, look, guys, we all want to work, there is plenty of work, but we also need to recognize that we've been working now, nonstop since, several months and we need to take a break, because at some point, otherwise it's, the efficiency is going to slack off. Yep. Because it's, you can't do that forever. It's the diet and nutrition. It's the we had one client actually who was telling us that they now, when they come to a new job, they build basic tables and benches and bring some chairs so that people don't need to take their lunches on sitting on nail boxes or and they've told that has changed a lot of things and now the table has it has a basket of fruit and they're constantly kind of looking at how can we make those small steps. And again, like buying a dozen apples is not going to break the bank for anyone, right? So right. Again, it's those small incremental steps where you can say like, look, we're going to take a daily lunch break, everyone, half an hour.
Right.
Again, that's not going to give you a massive, that's not going to make or break anything, but it will, over the long haul, it will make sure that people can take those breaks, are being taken care of. As Vivian was saying, bringing in people that can help them with, haircuts or just oil changes so that they don't need when they get off the job. after working for hours. They don't need now to kind of think about making an appointment at the barber or at the car shop and still have to do that as well. So that we're talking about these kinds of things. We have clients. You were talking about weather as well. Clients who put they put fans on jobs when it get really hot. They have a place where they build shades, and they have cold water coolers actually. And again, these are small steps, but they make a difference. And that's essentially what we're trying to see. And what Vivian was saying, we're really trying to collect those small, initiatives that people have tried out, tested out, and have worked, or maybe haven't. And so that's exactly where we are right now in that research. Is really checking, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Right. So it's more about trying to find out and putting those bottles in the sea, going to the world, and trying to see if people can write back about how we had a very hot summer, we had an unusually rainy winter. This is what we did to make our people feel better and not completely desperate about those situations. So that's really what we're doing right now. We're getting those submissions, and it's going pretty strong. And the goal of the entire exercise is to kind of categorize those interventions, big interventions, small interventions, categorize them, tag them, so that at some point we can put all of that online, and people that are interested in these interventions can don't need to think about what should I do to make it better, but they can just go and see what potentially has worked for other firms already, and make it happen much faster.
So that's interesting how you're actually soliciting real world examples of how well-being is being improved, and then you're collating those together into an online resource where people can tap into it and pull specific strategies for themselves and their businesses.
That's exactly what we're doing. Again, we're at the crossroads now where people are talking about it. We're convinced that people are going to start acting on it and making those decisions and redirect those resources. So let's make sure that when they're starting to do that, they don't feel like they're now in front of something that's, where do I start? Well, here is a resource, public resource for free. Just go and check it out, and maybe you'll find some ideas that will work for you as well, because they've worked for other people as well. So that's exactly what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's excellent. So tell me what is the length of this initiative going to be? How long are you going to be collecting the information before you publish it? Is it an ongoing thing? Tell me a little bit more about it.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's certainly ongoing. We joined Princeton in July officially, and it's a 1 year long fellowship program. So we have 1 year with Princeton, but that doesn't mean that that's going to stop. This initiative is going to stop after that 1 year. Where we are in our current process is we've had several roundtables, really joining all of those that want to participate in this initiative, gathering as much information as we possibly can from those other companies and their leaders. And we're now in the repository creation phase. So we've collected several submissions from the interventions and the content as I mentioned, and we're evaluating. So we're starting to evaluate those submissions. I'll add we're still collecting submissions. So for all of those that are listening, we'll certainly share more on how to submit. But in this evaluation phase, we're using Princeton's partnership with their team of researchers and behavioral sciences department to go through each submission, each intervention, and evaluate and assign a level associated with that. And then I believe...
And when you say a level, you're talking about the low, medium, high? Is that what you were saying?
Correct. Yeah. Of involvement and costs associated with that. Yes. And then I believe by Q2, so hopefully May at the latest.
Of 2023.
We're looking to have this published.
Okay.
So that's really our goal. Before we have the 1 year mark with Princeton, we're going to have that published and ready to go. And obviously, we're going to continue to speak about the initiative and raise awareness around it, and continue to build on this public repository, because I think that things will still come up from now until then. So we're looking at May 2023 for availability on it.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about. Let me ask you this real quick though. What are three, based upon the work you've done up to this point, what are 2 or 3 action items a construction company owner or senior executive should immediately take to increase the well-being of their labor and office workforce?
Yeah, Vivian, if you don't mind, I'll go first. I think the most important thing is to talk about it. It's not to put it under the rug and tell people, hey, man up, we have a job to do, because you can do that for a while, but at some point people have breaking points. So I think it's start actively kind of thinking of how you can go when you're visiting a job site and asking people, how are you doing? What's going on? And I think if you do it every single time you stop by, you will start getting genuine answers from people. They will really tell you what's going on. So that, I think, right now is the most important thing. And again, that's coming from all the conversations we're having with everyone that's kind of looking into this field, is talk. Talk needs to come first.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then
Vivian, what about you?
I was going to say, so most recently we the suicide hotline shifted from a 10-digit phone number to just a 3-digit number, which is the 988 number. I don't know if you're aware of that, Eric, but
no, I wasn't. No,
we now have a suicide hotline that's connected through just by dialing 988, and we have several of our clients that are actively posting posters on this suicide hotline number, and we've gotten feedback from them that it has made a difference, that there's already been individuals that have used that, and it's likely because it's been available for them to see. So excellent. I think that's something that's so easy and low, no cost associated with just printing off that poster. I'm sure you can find it from the suicide. We can send over the link. Sure. Suicide prevention hotline, and laminating that and posting it on site. Mm-hmm. I think that's that visual representation and is something that can potentially save some people.
Mm-hmm. And it's also taking away the stigma, because now you're actually posting something about mental health. So that means that now that's a conversation that we're ready to have. And we've seen that happening also. It's removing a stigma, which is very important, I think, at this stage too.
That's excellent. So tell us a little bit more about how people can start to get involved with this well-being initiative, how they can submit some of their stories and some of their perspectives, please.
Yeah. So it's very, very easy. Just go to a web browser and go to wellbeing.construction. So that's wellbeing.construction. And for the moment, it's going to redirect you to a Google form. And that's where we're asking people who are interested in this subject to submit their stories, submit their interventions, anything they've tested out at any level, superintendent, project manager, company-wide, it doesn't matter. But that's really what we're doing right now. So that's wellbeing.construction. Yep. We are also in the process of already gathering some high-level information that we would like to share with people sooner rather than later. So we will also use that link, wellbeing.construction, to start posting more information. So that's going to be the link going forward.
Excellent. Wellbeing.construction then is the key link. Excellent. Vivian, anything else that you want to say there on the contact aspect, or anything, just wrapping up here?
I think, Sebastien covered it. We're collecting those submissions. I think that's definitely where we stand. If you want to just talk to us and kind of pick our brain about anything, we're all ears. You can contact us at our phone number or email, which Eric, I think will share that.
Yep, it'll be in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely.
In the show notes. So yeah, we're all ears to take a phone call or chat over email about any ideas that you may have or anything that you'd like to share. We're also, if you'd like to be a keynote speaker for our future events, we're open to inviting anybody that would like to speak to our members of the Construction Wellbeing Initiative. We've had some great speakers so far from our previous events and from various backgrounds. So it doesn't, you don't even necessarily need to be in construction, though I'm sure most everybody on this show would be.
Yep.
So we're open to any conversation or participation from anybody.
Excellent. And just before we go here, I know, this is not necessarily your day job that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about the company that you guys are involved in, Skill Signal, please.
Yeah. So Vivian and I are the owners of Skill Signal. We started the company actually right before the pandemic. So that was at the end of 2019.
Great timing.
And Skill Signal is really it's a whole safety, compliance, and risk control platform based on mobile apps that we have designed. It's going really strong. We have about 50,000 people that are using the platform now. It's all around making sure that when people are coming to your job site as a GC, for example, that people will be able to access all of your safety orientation materials in several languages, that they'll be able to be informed of what's going on in terms of safety on your job, get to know your rules, being able to access your forms, and really giving all of that data back to the GC, who are usually our clients, and really making people more safe, giving you the advantage as a GC to be 100% compliant with everything that's happening on your job site. So it's a very unique platform. And again, we would love to talk to you about that as well. Out there, if you're interested to automate, making your safety more, a collaboration system. So that's something that that's our daytime job. So that's very, very, very interesting as well as far as we go.
Awesome. Vivian, anything you'd like to just close with here as we're wrapping up the interview?
I just want to thank you, Eric, for bringing us on. I mean, this is we're so passionate about construction and really the safety of our people. And I think we had mentioned that both Sebastien and I come from construction backgrounds, families being in construction. So this is really what we've known, and to be able to continue to share our message and really amplify our passions. We're really fortunate to be here with you today and to speak to your audience and to share that passion with everybody.
Well, it's tremendous. I'm very glad that you both came on. I think that this is a subject, like you guys say so well, that we have to talk about, and we have to think about those interventions that we can make that will have an impact. And it's not something that you're just going to wave a magic wand. We're not talking magic pills here. We're talking about something that's hard work because of the nature of the business, but incremental steps do need to be made. So really appreciate Sebastien, Vivian, both of you putting time and energy into this well-being initiative. So thanks for coming on the show here today.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having us.
Thanks again for listening to Construction Genius today. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sebastien and Vivian. Keep in mind that website that they mentioned, wellbeing.construction. You can go out there and you can submit some of your field-tested well-being interventions. And those can be part of the compilation of the online public repository to help increase the physical and mental well-being of construction workers on job sites. Of course, check out their website at skillsignal.com and contact them with any questions that you may have about the initiative. It's something that's going to be an ongoing discussion in the construction industry, a worthwhile discussion, and I hope that you will choose to participate in that. Thanks again for listening to Construction Genius today.